Is new adult a new maturity level now? My name is Gina. I'm an author, editor, publishing professional. I help you make your writing better. It is not new. It has been around for a while, but it is coming back in a different way. So travel back in time with me to the early 2010s, and we were on Twitter, and we had just survived sort of like the peak of Twilight, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, really sort of like crossing over into the adult fiction space. And yes, young adult fiction is intended for teenagers. If you don't like that, sorry, I'm not the one who made that up, and I'm not the one who's in charge of it. Young adult books are for teenagers, and please don't tell me what it means in your country. I don't know anything about your country. I'm talking about books in America because that's the only place where I work. So we had just seen some huge, massive crossover success in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and people were looking around and being like, are these kids really acting like kids, or should we have a different category that is not quite adult but is not quite teenagers either? So the idea for new adult sort of was born there, and there is more that went into this. There were a lot of discussions about this on Twitter at the time, but self-publishing and self-publishing romance was taking off at almost the exact same time. And not just taking off, but like taking off in a big, major way. People were starting to take self-publishing very, very seriously around the same time that this conversation around new adult versus young adult versus adult was happening. And so self-publishers of romance were like, great, I have all of these YA romance ideas. I'm just going to put them all in college now, and I'm going to add some graphic intimacy on the page that wouldn't have been allowed when they were teenagers, and bang, boom, I've got new adult romance. And a lot of people looked around and were like, okay, I guess that's what new adult means now. And so the publishers really sort of stopped looking for it. A lot of people shifted away from it within fantasy. We started talking about like young adult to adult crossover appeal. And so we basically left new adult to be sort of just like spicy young adult romances set in college. But the last couple of years, that has started to shift back. We are seeing more of these like 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old protagonists in genre fiction. So not just within the romance space, but within the fantasy, science fiction, thriller, all of those sorts of spaces. And it's not always necessarily about adding graphic intimacy on the page, but it is about making some decisions that are not quite adult decisions, but they are also not quite adolescent decisions. We have a whole generation of people that have this protracted sense of adolescence because college is impossibly expensive and people can't afford to move out of their parents' houses when they turn 18 or 19 years old anymore. And so the demographics of the book buying people have changed. The way that we view growing up and early adulthood stages is changing and shifting, and I think we are seeing that reflected in our fiction in a very real and tangible way. A couple of the big five publishers have opened up new adult imprints, which is really encouraging. Actually, I think only one of them is at a big five and the other one is at a mid-sized press, but this is still encouraging that this might get taken seriously as a category if some of these big houses are starting to put some money and starting to put some muscle behind it. Now, I think early on, those spots are going to go to some big name heavy hitters to make sure that they recoup those investments that they are making into those categories for new adult. At its core, young adult fiction will always be about deciding who you are and how you are going to fit into this world. Middle grade was about discovering that the world was so much bigger than you ever thought it was. Young adult is deciding how you're going to fit into that new, big, wide open world that you didn't know was there. And adult fiction was always about like wrestling with who you are and wrestling with those decisions, whether they were good or bad, and were they the right ones? Do I wish I could go back and do them differently, but I can't, so what am I going to do about it in my life now? And new adult is living in that space in between. Again, it is these decisions of who am I and am I willing to follow through with that? I made some decisions when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. Do those still serve me? Do I still see the world the same way, or am I fighting for something to be different? That's what new adult is going to be. That feels nebulous still. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for it to totally find its footing, but I'm excited to watch it happen and I hope it sticks.